This is our topic, this is the book we use in class. We're interested in the impact of war, specifically on Britain, First World War, interwar period, Second World War, and that 5-year period after the Second World War to about 1950. As you know, the exam paper is going to test your ability to analyse sources, to pull them apart, to look for bias, to look for reliability, and in some cases to think about who's written this, why have they produced it, what's the impression they want to give, what's the purpose of whatever it is, a poster, a diary. It's pulling sources to bits, you know that. So this isn't so much a memory test of your ability to remember dates and events and people. However, having said that, there are, I think, 4 key people you need to know in this particular topic that we're studying. So I'm just going to revise or go over some of these people and talk a little bit about them and their contribution to history and to our period in particular. Okay, the first guy I want you to look at, this guy here, Lloyd George. You may remember him from our study of Nazi Germany, of course, because he was the British Prime Minister for 2 years within the First World War, and he is the British Prime Minister at the Treaty of Versailles, so that you may remember him from that particular study. Okay, what can we say about this guy? He was Minister of Munitions for the first 2 years of the war, so an incredibly important job. His responsibility was to produce as much war material as possible, as many shells, as many bullets, as many guns, as many field artillery as possible for the war effort. The war that was meant to last until Christmas is dragging on and on and on, and it becomes a total war when the production of goods, the economic war if you like, is just as important as the tactical strategic war that's going on in France and Belgium. So he's got a crucial role in government. What does he do whilst he's Minister of Munitions? He's famous for reducing pub opening times. They used to be open all day. He condenses the time they're open to 2 hours at lunchtime and 4 or 5 hours in the evening. Why? Because he wants people to be at work rather than at the pub. He also waters down the beer, so reduces the strength of the beer to make sure the workers are not getting drunk so they can be more productive in the factories. That's one thing he does. Later on, he becomes Prime Minister in 1916 in a coalition government during the second half of the First World War. He also famously encourages the employment of women in industry, and is very proactive in getting them to take over the work of men who can then be released to go and fight on the front. You know, he has to overcome a lot of resistance to push this through, because there's this stereotypical view of women as inferior to men. How could they possibly do a hard, heavy job working in industry, you know, because they're seen in such a kind of stereotypical fashion. Nevertheless, he pushes these things through, and he's famous for this contribution to the war. He also, whilst he's in government, tries to develop or tries to put forward the idea of a kind of a welfare state. He's a very kind of progressive politician, and he tries to change Britain for the better. So he is a key significant individual. He's actually Prime Minister for the last 2 years of the war itself. Okay, that's Lloyd George, David Lloyd George. Secondly, kind of needs no introduction, we've spoken about him before. This is Winston Churchill. For much of the 1930s, a completely marginal figure, not in power, not in office, has very little influence on government during that period when Britain is trying to appease Nazi Germany and appease Adolf Hitler, going to extraordinary lengths to try and avoid another war. He is one of the very few people who perhaps recognises Hitler for the true, I hesitate to use the word evil, but to recognise the true nature of Nazi Germany and of Adolf Hitler himself. Famously comes back into the forefront of British politics after the disasters of 1939, 1940, and during the war, rest of the war, by his brilliant oration. Is arguably the greatest public speaker there has ever been. The power of his words manages to symbolise the stand that Britain is making against Nazi Germany. We can take it. We can withstand the Nazi onslaught, the Blitz, if you like, and he is emblematic of everything that was good about Britain as she stood alone against Nazi Germany. There's the famous cartoon of Britain standing alone. he is of interest if anything comes up about the Blitz, the fact that he toured the East End of London, you know, trying to raise morale, trying to raise people's spirits, and he is a key individual, and he will famously lose office. He will lose the 1945 election to everybody's complete surprise, because he is seen as such as a charismatic figure, such a key figure in British history, but he loses, and he will lose for a variety of reasons. We'll talk about them in a moment, but he is a key figure during the 1940, 41, 42, etc. Another key figure, we spoke about him in class, this is William Beveridge. Not in government, he's a member of the Liberal Party, a minority party, unlike the Conservatives and Labour, but he is given the task, you know, a very clever guy, of coming up with a design, a blueprint, a plan for a better Britain once the war has been successfully completed, if you like. In 1942, midway through the war, he is asked to draw up a plan for a better Britain. And he identifies famously 5 giants that must be defeated if Britain is going to be a better place to live in. There was a general feeling that Britain had endured a terrible war. She should never have to go through that again, and she should become a country worth fighting for. Many people had endured the depression and unemployment during the 1930s, and they were determined not to repeat the mistakes that had been made after the First World War, where the country had gone into a slump. So make a better Britain, again, famous cartoon, wartime soldier toasting Beveridge, he's to a better future, he's to, in theory, the creation of a better country, a better Britain, a welfare state. And the welfare state was part of this guy's manifesto. His name is Clement Attlee. He was the leader of the Labour Party. During the war, Britain was governed for the last 4 years of the war by a coalition government, like we have today, where all the different parties put aside their differences and work together for the duration of the war to ensure that we beat Nazi Germany. And he was the leader of the Labour Party. Once the war is won against Nazi Germany in 1945, the coalition is suspended and there is an election. His party, the Labour Party, wins by a landslide. This astonishes not only Britons but people all over the world, of course, that our great hero Winston Churchill has been kicked out of office. Why is he elected? Because lots of soldiers, as shown in this front page of the Daily Mirror, were weary of war, wanted a better future, and the Labour Party were pledged to put Mr. Beveridge's plan into action, to make it law, to set up the welfare state where people would be cared from the cradle to the grave, you know, a better education system, better housing, a national health service. These were all revolutionary ideas in 1945. His government, the Labour government, were pledged to put them into practice. That's why he's a significant figure, because him and the Labour Party that became the government in 1945 changed the political landscape of Britain. And, you know, things that are kind of second nature to us now, we don't worry about them or think twice about them. The National Health Service, unemployment benefit, child benefit, better housing, all of these things are introduced by his government. So again, he is a key figure, a key individual for our study. That's Clement Attlee.